Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, come back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Eirc T. Elder. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Eirc T. Elder. I'm a creative media consultant. I specialize in animation, video games, and XR. I've been in the industry for 30 years plus, and founded one of the first bachelor's degree programs in video game development about 20 years ago. So,
Excelente, excelente. So you're from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Yep. How was it growing up? What is your origin story?
Sure. So yeah, I grew up in a place called Nicetown, which is, not so nice. It was a, pretty rough neighborhood that got progressively rougher, I guess, as I got to my college years. Growing up, I was born in 1970, so what the 80s was like in the inner city. Those were like my teenage years. So yeah, I mean, that said, I actually had a really great childhood. I was really kind of fortunate to be spoiled. I had a bunch of toys and games and got an Atari 2600. I mean, my parents just did a really great job of, providing whatever we needed and a lot of what we wanted growing up. My mom was an art school teacher in the Philadelphia school system for 40 plus years. So, and art ran in her side of the family too. So nice. I definitely got the art from her and started drawing very early in life. I just noticed, the kind of meditative state she would get into whenever she would draw. I would watch her, and it was very attractive to me, and I think that's why I started doing it. Let me see, what was my first formal art training, I guess, was, so she went to an all-girls college called Moore College of Art in Philadelphia, which is still around today. I think actually I know because my young nephew just, I think, got accepted there for animation, I think. So it used to be all-girls school. She went there, and then when I was about 12 or 13 or so, she would teach, in addition to teaching during the week, she picked up Saturday classes there to make extra money. And she also got with that, she was able to get me a scholarship so I could take classes for free. Now, I wanted to, like any other kid, to watch Saturday morning cartoons. It was like I don't even think there were VCRs back then, or if there was, you weren't, I guess, recording the Saturday morning cartoons. I don't think I could at that time, if I remember correctly. But, she was like, no, you're getting these classes for free, you're going. So she kind of forced me to go. And I was very upset at first until I actually got there. And then I found I really enjoyed it. And then after the first couple intro classes, I discovered figure drawing. And that's what really had me, kind of fall in love with art and drawing. Little did I know, like, that's exactly the training that you need to become an animator. And this was like when I was about 13 years old, I started taking college level figure drawing classes. So very fortunate to do that. Fast forward all through high school, I did all kinds of art. I did, ballet, dance, and modern classes. I was in the choir. Of course, I did visual art, theater, like anything art related. That's what I did. I kind of rejected sports. I was, pretty clumsy, not really great athletically. And also just like me being very tall. I'm 6'2". So me being like close to 6 foot when I was in high school, it was just everybody's expectation was always that I would be, play basketball or football or something. And that really annoyed me. That I don't think I really understood it at the time, but just that was the automatic expectation. Like that was the only way that I could be successful or, in life, was if I did sports. Right. So yeah, I long story short, on the school side of things, after high school, I wound up going to the University Arts um, in Philadelphia. It used to be Philadelphia College of Art. It was one of the first art universities in the country that was established. And I got in there at the last minute, and I went and I took the foundation year. And at that point, I thought I wanted to be a fashion illustrator just because I used to draw, women from like catalogs, like my mom's Saks Avenue catalog and stuff like that. I was pretty good at copying that. And so I was like, oh, fashion illustration, that seems like something you could do for a living. They didn't have that major at my school. The closest thing was illustration. And I took that elective, because you take these electives so you can figure out what your major is going to be after your first year.
Right.
I took the illustration elective, and I hated it. I just didn't like the teacher. I didn't like the assignments, the process, like just anything about being an illustrator. I was just, this is not for me. Although I'm sure fashion illustration is different, but that was what that's what was available. Right. Luckily, the other elective I took was called Freshman Kinetics, and that was the precursor to photo, film, and animation. And I took that and I loved it. We did scratch film and wrote scripts, and I was like, wow, this is it. Yeah. So I become a major with a focus in animation and minor in fine art. I still continue to do a lot of figure drawing and painting and develop my portfolio. I was crushed I didn't get the Disney internship out of college. They had at that time, I graduated in 92. So it wasn't quite the big boom yet, but Disney was definitely on the rise again from their, kind of like coming back from the Black Cauldron days.
Yeah.
And moving towards, the success of Little Mermaid, which I think was in 95. And so they started this new internship in Florida, and they only had 13 spots, and they took like 1,000 portfolios, and I made it into the top 100 or 90 or something like that, but I didn't make it into 13. So I was really crushed. I thought my life was over at like the age of 21, and what am I going to do now? There's no animation. Actually, there was one animation studio in Philadelphia called the Production House, and I did work there, and I made enough money to get my first, animation disc at home, little studio set up. Let me see. The next thing was, I out of necessity, because animation, the equipment, we were still, shooting some stuff on film when I was in school, but then they had these newfangled, video animation machines to shoot your animation, and they were super expensive, for somebody like me. I stayed on. We got a new teacher from California that went to CalArts, a new animation teacher named Sheila Sophian. She's at USC now, I think. She kind of needed some help, kind of getting adjusted to everything. And I offered to basically be her a teaching assistant for free, just so I can learn from her and I could keep access to the equipment and all of that stuff. So I did that, and that led to her recommending me for a teaching position. They were looking, because you imagine in Philadelphia, there wasn't a lot of animation instructors. There's no industry there.
Yeah.
So there was another school around the corner called the Art Institute in Philadelphia, and they were desperately looking for animation teachers, and her husband taught around there. And so he recommended me, and I got an interview and I got the job. So at the age of like 25, I was actually like a professor, which I never wanted to go into education. Like I wanted to be a producer. I wanted to be in the industry. And I just felt like if I started teaching, I would just stay a teacher for my career. I didn't want that. But, later on, I realized that leaning into education was actually really good for my career. Right.
Yeah.
So, So I taught there for a couple years. That led to me setting up this big trip. There was this animation celebration where, I did a field trip and brought like 30 kids out to California for this thing in Pasadena, this kind of animation festival. And, we all went, and I got like a kind of one-way ticket, or like an open ticket, I think they called it at the time. So they all went back on the plane and I stayed. Um, and actually the previous year I had brought just a few students out. And they all wound up getting jobs. Long story short, they wound up getting jobs in the industry. One of them was on Spider-Man. He was one of my students. And then two of them got hired at Klasky Chupo, one on Rugrats and one on Duckman.
Nice.
So all three of my students that I did this field trip the previous year to California, they all got hired, and they were making, $50,000 a year to start, which was a lot of money at that time. And
right.
And whatever year that was, 2005, I think, and full benefits, and they were starting and they were in the business, and I was like, man, like, I want that to be me, right? Like I want to have that success as well. And so, yeah, so the following year I came back out and I stayed out, and I, kind of crashed around with them and took my portfolio like all over town on the bus. From the East Coast, I was used to traveling on a bus. Wasn't a big deal, but in California, it's a different story. But I did it. This was before the time of like internet portfolios and all that stuff. I was still dropping off video cassettes and paper at these studios, getting rejected from everywhere. They had started this new show called King of the Hill on at Film Roman, at the studio that did The Simpsons. And my former student friend that was working on Spider-Man was now an assistant director on King of the Hill, and they really needed people. And so I took a storyboard test on my way out there, and I didn't pass the test, but they did like how I drew the characters. So they sent me a test for a position called character layout, which is basically like the key animator. And so I took the test, and I failed that too the first time. So it was just like, after 3 months of being out here in California, I was just like, oh man, like my bills are piling up. I'm not making any money. My teaching job is waiting for me. Maybe, I have to try this another time. But I remember one day I just was like in Hollywood at, my friend's apartment, my former student's apartment. And I'm looking out the window, and I'm like, I can't do that. I can't be that guy that, it's like such a cliche, right? That like went out to Hollywood and got chewed up and spit out because he couldn't hack it. And, had to come back with his tail between his legs. I was like, I got to figure this out. I was like, at least I know they need people on King of the Hill, and I'm getting recommended. They like my drawing.
Yeah.
I took the test once. What's to say I can't take it again?
Right.
And then just keep taking it until they hire me. And so I made an appointment to go see my friend, and he had his director. I still remember the guy's name, Gary McGarver. He took a look at my test, and he gave me a couple pointers. And basically he was like, you know what? These characters are not, your typical animation. They're a pain in the ass to draw.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to trace the model sheet. And it's like, you think it's cheating, but it's not. You just got to, it's production work. You got to get the job done. Right. And I was like, oh my God, I would have never thought to do that. Right. So,
because that's like children, like tracing is like cheating. And so like artists, I feel like through the years, we just learned these like rules that aren't actually rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually tracing it, you still have to really be able to draw. Like you can't, it's not like it's, you're just still work. So anyway, I just remember going to Staples and getting a bunch of different copies of model sheets at different sizes, and took them back to my desk and redid the test. And it basically came down to me and another former student that I had. We we were both up for the job,
Mm-hmm.
and they had one spot left. And we kind of made this pact. We were like, well, if you get it, we'll get an apartment together. If you get it, I'll help you out.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you got to get a job doing something else, and if I get it, the same thing, and we'll just, and sure enough, like we both got the job, like offered like the same day, and they squeezed us both in there, and so we got the salary and everything. So that was my first California job. I also did we were talking earlier. I did a brief stint at MTV Animation in New York, working on the Beavis and Butthead feature. And so, yeah, that was actually another end. Like there was I think the recruiting guy at the time, Jay Francis, he saw my, Jay, he's at Disney TV now. He saw my name in the credits. They were they were desperate to get people to work on King of the Hill, because at that time, the whole business was just booming. Like, there wasn't enough talent to go around, and nobody really wanted to work on the show nobody heard of that looked like Beavis and Butthead, kind of. So he saw my name in the credits of the Beavis and Butthead movie, and reached out to me. So that was like kind of another end over on King of the Hill. But it was great. I love King of the Hill. I had a wonderful time on that show. One of my episodes that I worked on won an Emmy Award. I used to sit right next to Dave Filoni, who is like in charge of Star Wars now. He's a really close friend of mine that I met during the show, along with a lot of other amazing, talented people. And we did that, like I said, did that for about 3 years. And then at some point I kind of realized, like, I'm not going to get it. It started to be a bit of a grind. And I was like, and I also kind of got the feeling that I wasn't gonna move up, like I wasn't gonna become like an assistant director or anything. Like I could easily be at that level for years, for decades in my career.
Yeah.
And I started to suspect that, like, even though I didn't experience overt racism, I started to suspect the reason why I'm not moving up or being considered is because I'm Black. There was only like a few other Black people on the crew at the time. And I noticed throughout the industry, as I started to meet more people that worked in animation in California, there's very few of us. And again, I got a first-hand experience. Like, again, my friend and former student that, we were roommates. So, I got to see, like, because he actually did get promoted to assistant director, and he was younger than me. And like, I remember we sat down in my living room one time, or it was our living room, and he was like, I don't get it. He was like, you're just as talented as I am. You're very responsible. You're probably more responsible. Really, not probably. You are more responsible than me. Like all these like things that you have. How come they're not asking you to be assistant director or training you? And I was just like, well, and he was just shocked. He was like, no, they can't be it. Like they, I can't believe that. But I mean, we were experiencing it. There was no other real explanation for it. So at that point, like, again, I started making some realizations about my career. Now I'm like 30 years old or so. And I also realized I didn't want to be a production artist. I actually wanted to be a producer. I noticed that the producer's name in the credits was way bigger than mine. And he got driven to work in a black car, and he had a big office. And, not only those perks though, but I just felt like organization and communication and stuff I was better suited to those things than production art.
Yeah.
So I started looking into what it would take to be a producer. And then also at the same time, I got this opportunity. I would teach during my they would have a hiatus from January to March every season. So during that time period, I would teach at the Art Institute in Santa Monica. And I would teach animation. And the first time I did it, it was amazing, because I hadn't taught in a couple of years. And then Now I had studio experience at like a real studio. It wasn't like theory or just what I learned from Philadelphia. And I fell in love with teaching again because I was reinvigorated and I had so much more information to share. And that first class, the kids loved it so much they kind of demanded to have me back. And so I taught some more classes, and then I got offered full time at the Art Institute. And then that led to, and then that's when I made the decision to leave the show. Because again, one of the realizations I had was like, I've worked on the show now. I'm not going to get any more cachet from King of the Hill by continuing to work on it season after season. So, I decided to leave the show, and I went to full-time teaching. It was 20 hours a week versus 40 plus hours a week. It wasn't that much less money. It was a pay cut, but it wasn't very much at all. And they were going to give me all the animation production classes, which I thought, oh, this will be great experience for me to learn how to be a producer, is by actually training people and producing this animation with students. What I was thinking was I'll go and I'll teach for a couple of years. I'll learn producing. I'll get experience as producer. I'll get some stuff under my belt, some shorts or whatever. And then I'll go back into the industry. But I had such a good time at the Art Institute teaching, and then like I became the assistant chair. Then I was the chair for the animation department. And then they started a games program, which I always loved games. And so then I was kind of like co-chair of animation and games. And then the program got big enough that it needed its own director, and I actually was given the choice of taking the animation or the game program as the academic director, and I chose the game program and got really successful with that. When we started having graduates, I had like a 90 to 100% placement rate in AAA games, and I created this game production team called the Game Wizards, the special class. And I just had an absolute blast while I was there. And instead of doing it for a couple of years, I wound up being there for like over 10 years. I think it was like 11 years before I left that position.
Nice.
So yeah, it was a good run. Really some of the happiest, kind of time in my career. Then after that, I kind of, moved around and tried to figure out what to do next. I think at the time I was looking at I had this kind of like funny dream or vision of making like an interactive casino. So I thought about getting into, like, I thought the future, like, I guess I always loved casinos and hotels for some reason. And I was just like, when I would go to a casino and like play poker or whatever, I would be like, the future of this is going to be immersive gaming. And like, if I could figure out how to get into that and, be on the ground floor of that, that could be huge. And I think something I would really enjoy.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about was, the educational system was pretty broken. And I also thought that gaming, I saw this future where education would be combined with games. Like I used to say, I think in the future, education is going to be free. It's going to be sponsored by a corporation, and it's going to be games. Like that's how people, like kids, are going to learn, which I still kind of believe that. I think it's kind of happening now. So I wound up working with a little startup doing game education just for a little bit. And then I did wind up getting a job at a company called Diamond Game that does slot machines. They make slot machine software. At the time, they were doing like Indian casino gaming. And I went for one position just to kind of I think it was like a marketing position or something, just to try to get my foot in the door. But then when they got my resume, they said, we actually have this other role, which wasn't posted, for a creative director. And when we saw your background and your experience of working in animation and, with students and everything, and you actually, a former student from your school actually works for us as an artist, and they knew of you and they recommended you, and we think you'd be good for this. Would you interview for this? And I was like, wow, like, yeah, what would I be doing? It'd be like coming up with the creative ideas for the games and managing the artists. And I was like, wow, like that sounds like that would be perfect. So I interviewed and I got that job, and I worked with Diamond Game for a few years. And then they got acquired and had some restructuring, and I left for a few, but actually I'm working back with them now. I've been working back with them for several years now, but now we're working on contract. So that's one of the things I'm still doing now.
What are some of the best childhood memories that you had?
Well, I think my memories of gaming, it was getting an Atari 2600 and playing that all the time by myself or with my cousins. And then also when I was younger, I was into board games too, and I remember getting Dungeons and Dragons. There's a board game called Dungeon that came out in the late 70s, early 80s. It was just called Dungeon. And I got that game and I loved it. And I just remember playing it with my childhood friends, and I used to go stay with my grandmothers and just playing with teaching them the game and going through it, and just that magic of, the context of the game and rules to kind of transport you to a different place and be doing something. Yeah, exactly.
What is your cultural makeup? And that's not only to say like what's your ethnicity, but what is the culture of where you grew up and the uniqueness of where you're from?
Wow. I mean, again, Philly, like I said, it's kind of like a rough town. Being from the East Coast versus LA, I would say, just a lot more, I guess, like gritty, or, I don't know what you call it, I guess you have to be more street smart in a way. Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's this great quote or this bit that I saw about the difference between East Coast people and West Coast people. Which bit the example is the East Coast person will help you, see you on the side of the road and help you get fix your flat tire, but they'll cuss you out while you're doing it.
I use that all the time.
Versus the California person will be like, "Oh, sorry, I can't help you." So
I also use that for the South too. Being from the Midwest, I didn't really like living in the South.
Yeah, it's definitely different.
I feel like there's more genuine people in there's genuine people in the South, but there's more kind people in the Midwest and the East Coast.
Right.
It's not only about being nice.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, I think that's the distinction they were making, being authentic versus being nice or polite, right? Yeah.
Do you find something else that because I've only been in LA for 4 years, but a lot of people theorize sometimes, at least when you initially get here, a lot of your friends, if you're from the East Coast or the Midwest, a lot of your friends are going to be from the East Coast and the Midwest too.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely was the case for me. I mean, again, there's a lot of transplants, and I knew several people, because of my origin story from the East Coast, my former students. So I was all friends with them, and we all, or several of us, wound up working on King of the Hill together. And staying in touch. We were the first people that we really knew. Out here, because we met back in Philly. So I think definitely and Filoni, he was from Pittsburgh. He was an East Coast guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, definitely. I think when you first move here, you definitely gravitate more towards those people or types of people.
Yeah.
For sure, I agree with that.
What is your favorite tradition from growing up with your family?
God, favorite tradition.
And it could be as simple as like we went to go eat ice cream on Sundays.
Probably, I mean, stuff that's related to food, like just my grandmother and then my aunt were just amazing holiday dinner cooks. Like the stuffing was like incredible, and just everything, all the sides and turkey and everything. And so I would just always look forward to that. And I know when I first moved out here, that's the time of year I would go back. Like
Right.
California, so I would go back for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, I would say that's favorite tradition from childhood. It's like that good Thanksgiving plate.
That is definitely my favorite holiday because I stopped getting presents in high school for Christmas. So like, I'm like, yes, eating is my favorite holiday, and then I'm trying to collect restaurants in LA because eating in LA just makes you want to cook at home. I mean, at least for me.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think a lot like, I don't like even have a favorite restaurant really. Just like you just eat what you can, right? Like maybe Faux Show. I like that Vietnamese food place. It's great in Culver City.
A lot of eating to stay alive in LA.
Yeah. But there are a lot of choices though, so
yeah,
I mean, it really pays to explore and try different places.
Yeah, my eating for enjoyment will probably come from like Mexican or Korean food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a funny story that your family tells about you that you would like to share?
The only funny story that comes to mind is that like, and I don't even remember this, when I was little, I had this toy camera, and I had my god sister. I got upset with her about something, and I clobbered her over the head with this camera, with this toy. And then I don't know, like why that was, why I would do something like that, like why I was so, I don't know. I guess I wasn't typically violent, but that was a violent incident, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Did she always bring that up, or did the family always bring that up?
Yeah, the family just would always bring that up, like for some reason about that time that I went crazy.
You acted outside yourself.
Yeah.
So I know you said your mom was in art. Was your like whole family supportive of your artistic endeavors, or?
I would say most people were. People were always impressed by my drawing ability. It was actually my mom didn't really want me to pursue it as a career. She wanted me to do, because she didn't want me to be a struggling artist, right? So she wanted me to be like a doctor or something like that. And I considered going to like psychiatry. That was like the only other thing I even thought about doing as a career. But when it came down to it, I was just like, no, this is what I love to do. This is the only thing I think I would be happy doing, is something art related. So I stuck with it, and like I said, got into college at the last minute, and was able to. I struggled definitely a bit at times in my career earlier on and in my 40s, but for the most part, I've been able to, do pretty well with it.
Okay, so I will now list some projects that you've worked on, and then if you could add to the list if you want, because I'm not going to go through the whole list,
Sure.
But I'll just name some stuff. So obviously, like at the start of your career, King of the Hill, Simpsons, and Beavis and Butthead Do America, and then you have Buffalo Power, Cleopatra's Riches, Frogger, Naughty or Nice, Fun Day Night Football, Tutti Frutti, Bonus Factory, Moon Rocks, Prize Pirates, Giant Mammoth, Psychedelic Sevens, Red Hot Lotto, Mob Money, etc., etc. Are there any notable things that you've worked on that you want to mention? Or any reminiscing?
Yeah, I mean, most of those are games that I think I lost track. I think I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 games that I've done with Diamond Games since I guess over the span of about, I think it's been about 8 years now, maybe 8 or 9 years. I have to go back. Cleopatra's Riches stands out to me just because I always wanted to do like kind of produce something that was like Egyptian themed. And I got to work with artists to design this Cleopatra character and get her modeled and rigged and animated in the game, and just create this whole kind of like Egyptian world for this game with all the different art assets. So I think that was pretty satisfying for me to kind of, I guess, always want to do that and then be able to achieve it. So yeah, that's the one game that stands out. But I mean, it's been a lot of great games. Being able to work on IP, other games and stuff like doing the Frogger game, which was really successful in the market.
Yeah.
Buffalo Power was the game that I did when I came back to Diamond Game after a hiatus of a couple of years. So that's always a memorable one because that was like, this is my comeback game, in the industry. But yeah, it's. I mean, I have kind of like good kind of creative memories or experiences from a lot of the games that I've done over the years.
What do you love about animation and video games?
Well, from definitely the ability to be imaginative, in animation and games. Like, I just love genre related stuff like fantasy, sci-fi. You get to, creatively explore these different genres when you're producing or creating content. And then, as a producer or creative director, just getting great art from really talented artists. Like you give an assignment or a task, or you give some notes or creative direction or come up with an idea, and then the artist produces something, and just getting back a great result is just always like, it's like opening a piece of candy. It's like you get a great piece of artwork on the project. So I think that's my favorite part. And just working with art, I like working with creative people in that whole process.
You also like board games. What do you like about that?
I just love
tabletop games, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I would say tabletop or board games. Yeah. Again, I kind of alluded to it before, but I just think it's kind of fascinating that you can take some words, like a rule set, and some cardboard and some dice and paper, and be transported to like a fantastic world, through your imagination, and this kind of shared experience around a table with other human beings. I don't think there's anything else quite like it. So I just really enjoy it. I love game design. I realized at a certain point, I've dabbled with it. I wouldn't call myself a game designer necessarily, but I've definitely attempted to design some games and come up with some prototypes and tested them.
Yeah.
And I know, I think the design process itself, and I think this is, I love world building as well. And I think it's very similar, like just the design of like a system design and the design of a world is just really kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah. So in your past, you are a singing waiter on the Spirit of Philadelphia. I heard you say that you took choir. So was this good singing?
I wasn't one of the best singers, but I did okay. You know, I actually, it's funny. Like my first song, and I think it wound up being my song for. I don't know if I ever switched it up. Was the Kermit version of the Rainbow Connection. I used to do that. And the old ladies would love it. They would just eat it up whenever I did that song. Like I would always get like crazy tips for some reason. Like people.
Nice. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. It was good for day cruises.
Yeah. So like through all your experience in education and creating like successful programs, what do you think are the key things in creating a successful education program for like a creative job, I guess?
Yeah. The most important thing is production teams. I'm absolutely sure about that. Like if you're going to school for animation or for games and you check out the program and they don't have some type of special production team component where you're actually, doing a role, again, simulating as closely to what you're going to do when you get out in the industry. Like you need to have as much of that experience as you can, I think, before you get like an internship, ideally. And so like the design of how that's going to work and how that's facilitated, I think is the most important thing. Yeah.
So on the side of like educators trying to create these things, what are some additional things that you think educators should keep in mind when creating these programs?
I mean, I think just making sure that like all the processes and like even like software, all the different components are relevant. Because these are industries that move relatively quickly. Like AI is the big thing now, I think.
Yeah.
Just in a lot of spaces, but definitely also in animation art. I mean, some of the AI animation pipeline stuff I've been seeing is kind of mind blowing, considering where I started out in animation.
Right.
But yeah, like I always say, if you're at college level, you're training students who start in your program, if you have a 2 to 3 year program, not for the industry as it is when they start, but in the industry like 3 to 5 years from now. So how do you keep what you're teaching relevant? Like that's one of the big, I think, things you need to address if you're designing or maintaining one of these programs, or an instructor, or anyone who's facilitating this type of training.
And I know you've had experience kind of teaching at various different institutions. So is there like a difference? Because sometimes in a more traditional institution, it could be a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, and you can't move as agile as it, maybe the more for-profit or kind of newer style educational institutions. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's absolutely accurate. I've had experience now. Again, the Art Institute was a for-profit education, which really got a bad name over the years. I'm very proud of the programs that we had and had a lot of successful graduates, but I know that wasn't the case at a lot of other schools in different places. But you could do stuff like if you came up with an idea, you could, like you said, be pretty agile, and you could, again, the class that I came up with, which made our program so successful, the Game Wizards production team class, nobody else had anything quite like it. It was pretty unique that we were able to do something like that. Whereas I'm working with the role I have right now, or another role I have right now, is I'm the lead of this something called the LA Game Project, which is with the LA Regional Consortium,
Mhm.
which is a group that manages all 19 community colleges in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so I have had that experience that because of it's not for profit and it's public education and it's all, state funded and grant funded.
Mhm.
There's just, like you said, so much red tape, bureaucracy,
Yeah.
um, hurdles that you have to go through to get anything done at all. It just takes really a long time, and it can be quite frustrating.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm feeling like I don't know. I also work with a nonprofit called BlkWmnAnimator,
Mhm.
and we started a game program, Game Wizard South LA, um, about a year or so ago.
Mhm.
And I just feel like doing things with a nonprofit, if you're able to get grant funding like directly,
Yeah.
is you're just allowed a lot more flexibility, I feel like,
Yeah.
than some of the more traditional training models.
With you founding online worlds, what did you want to do with that, and how has it grown, and what is it now?
Yeah, so Online Worlds, the company I started, uh, originally, I think we were like the idea of the company, we were like kind of way ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
Uh, we founded the company to create virtual worlds for movie and TV IP.
Mhm.
Um, kind of before this latest wave of VR and even the kind of virtual worlds that happened around 2000. I think we founded the company in '97, I believe.
Yep,
So
that's what it says.
yeah, so it's getting up there. It's getting close to 30 years old.
Mhm.
Mostly I've used the shingle as my way to do consulting work,
Mhm.
um, um, which has been production consulting, animation, a
Mhm.
lot of over recent years has been a lot of educational consulting.
Mhm.
Um, but I think there's some new opportunities, and I think technology that will allow us to create some new projects in the future that are kind of more in alignment with what how we originally intended, you know,
Mhm.
the company to be. Which is I'm still very interested in doing that, making virtual spaces online.
Yeah.
Um, it could be using tools like Unreal,
Yep.
uh, but there's a lot of successful models out there now, like Roblox and what's happening in Fortnite Creative, things like that. So,
Mhm. What do you do as a video game career coach?
yeah, so I've always wound up doing some type of mentoring and coaching. It's something I'm actually trying to figure out a way to really focus on now. Now we have the Zoom model. And so what I've been thinking about offering is kind of like group coaching calls that could be
Mhm.
affordable for um, younger people who are looking at a career in animation or video games and trying to figure out what school to go to, or recent graduates that are trying to still figure out how to get their foot in the door and kind of what they need. I mean, I've just had so many conversations with people who are new or trying to transition, and being able to advise them on, you know, what steps they need to take to get a certain role in
Yeah.
the gaming or animation industry. So,
What would you say is your superpower? It doesn't necessarily have to be career related, but what are you like really good at?
I mean, I like to think it's my ability to listen. I think I've really practiced listening. I think listening is the most important part of communication. I believe that.
Mhm.
So, yeah, just really being able to responsibly and effectively listen, I think is good, really good for management,
Hmm.
um, and just in terms of like just any type of leadership role. I think it's really important that you do that and be an effective communicator.
So for maybe aspiring leaders or people who've been like thrown into leadership, what are the um, implementations of the listening? Like, well, why is it good to listen as a leader and stuff?
Well, again, I think a lot of times in communication, people are not really listening. They're kind of like hearing some of what you're saying and thinking about what they're going to say next.
Hmm.
So I think just really getting like having people feel like they're really heard and gotten,
Yeah.
I think is really important for like leadership. Because I just feel like when people feel like they actually have a voice, like if you're like in a team or in a group of people, and they feel like they really have a voice and that they can communicate what's going on, and that um, that there'll be some response, you know,
Yeah.
to whatever they're communicating, or that whatever they're dealing with um, is going to be handled responsibly. I think makes a big difference for people and has them be happier wherever they are, whatever they're doing, if it's a project or a team or a company department.
Hmm. I also think it's like important to not just like go through the motions of like making people feel heard. Sometimes it's like for me personally, I would rather you just not do that at all than to. I've been in situations where they like bring us into the proverbial room and like we're here to listen. Everybody talks, everybody problem solves, and then they do whatever they want to do before we even
Right.
were in the meeting. And it's like, people pay attention to that, right? So I just would rather it not be a meeting at all. Just do what you want at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't pretend to listen.
Yeah. It's really like I think a level of disrespect when you do that to people, because like they're
Yeah.
people aren't dumb, they know what's going on, and
Yeah.
it's pretentious, to
Mhm.
like I hate those meetings in corporate where yeah, like you do this kind of like workshop or whatever, and all these notes get taken, or these big whiteboards where you draw all this stuff and you do all these
Yeah.
exercises, and then nobody captures the information, or like there's no follow up, or no real action plan gets created from whatever happened in the meeting, and it just it makes people feel like it was just a waste of their time.
Yeah. Hmm.
But conversely, I think when you can do that effectively, when you can get people together and really get their
Yeah.
feedback and come up with some really you know innovative or new or fresh ideas,
Hmm.
how to accomplish something, and you do implement it, and you do have a plan, and there is follow up, I think it could be super effective.
Yeah. I feel like another thing that makes me think of is whether it's in the education space or the career space. For me, being a professor and have been in leadership in volunteer organizations and stuff like that. I feel like I've learned that evaluation is very important for the success of something. I've been in different leadership programs where I remember I was in one leadership program in New Orleans, and I'm taking notes. I'm like, my coach that you all gave us for like starting this business, this nonprofit or whatever. I'm like, she was good for the beginning stuff, but we needed to go to another level for some stuff. And no, I took the notes and nobody ever asked how my coach was, and I was like, I was ready to tell my story. Like she wasn't the worst, but you could tell probably her business partner was the brains behind her venture.
Yeah.
And so like right now as a professor, like like I have like their last discussion is evaluating me and my class, and at the institution I teach right now, I've been teaching there since last summer, and like each for like my because I teach introduction to 3D modeling and introduction to 3D animation, and so for my modeling class, I've like reiterated like I've iterated each time for my class based on what my students have said.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've gotten to a really good place this past this summer, and so it's just like if nobody's evaluating what's going on, then nothing can get better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
You mentioned working on King of the Hill and not really getting promoted and whatnot. Is there any other areas where you feel like being Black or any other ism affected your career in any way?
I would say not really. Like, I again, I believe also so much of what happens in life and what your experience is also really based on your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So I think around about that time or sometime after, I kind of just made it a conscious decision to just not think that way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, well, you don't have to do anything, but I think it makes sense to like just be mindful that, racism or like, even if it's not overt or intentional, um, is still, it still exists, it's still out there. But
Mm-hmm.
you also, I believe, like you have to believe that, you know, being Black, it's more empowering to believe, and put it this way, it's more empowering to believe that being Black is your superpower than
Mm-hmm.
that you don't get that you don't get opportunities because of it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like at a certain point, and I can't even recall exactly when I did it, but
Mm-hmm.
just in light of the question, I was like, oh, I haven't really thought about me being Black hindering my career in a long, long time. And I think that was a conscious effort on my part to make sure that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
hold on to that belief.
Yeah.
Because,
But that's something that was important with the King of the Hill thing was like you have to understand where your kryptonite is too. So if you pivoted out of it because you had the acknowledgement. So
yep, exactly.
because sometimes we have glass ceiling, glass cliff, and you have to kind of recognize it for what it is so you can pivot in your career.
Yeah. I mean, and that thing about, needing to work 10 times as hard, that's a real thing. I think but it's again, if you come at it from, I got to work 10 times as hard because I'm Black just to kind of get to the same place as, some other person.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, woe is me, versus, hey, this is just the reality of the situation, because some people might have, unconscious bias. I need to work that much harder, and I'm just gonna be the best. I'm just gonna work that hard. Like that kind of like, people like Kobe Bryant who, you know, just had this incredible work ethic. If you kind of
Mm-hmm.
take it from that point of view, I just think it's a lot more valuable, kind of in terms of your mindset, to think about it that way.
Yeah, as I've learned over the decades, like I feel like we honestly probably could be delivered from the working twice as hard thing too, because like from hearing some of my friends who, spent time with their cream team, as I call them, there's like so ways that the majority navigates that we just don't know. There's like the unknown
Yeah.
unknowns of like networking and the cronyism that if we learn how to do the soft skills and some of the other strategic things that they kind of just learn by growing up as who they are, we actually wouldn't have to work that hard at these as well, to be honest.
Yeah. And again, that even like, I think I heard Oprah say one time, you don't get what you want, you get what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even, having to work hard is a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who says, Like if you could have a life where, you know, you made a good living, but you didn't have to work that hard,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like that's, I mean, unless you're really into working hard, you know, that's something
Yeah.
that you could have that experience. Some people have that kind of life, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think there is. It's like I kind of don't really like the thing of, it's kind of a cliche, not work harder, work smarter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but at the same time, I think there is kind of something to that. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
there's um, again just ways to think about work, and whatever your kind of context or belief system about it just has a big impact about, you know, how your experience of life is going to be in your career
Mm-hmm.
and whatever you're doing in life.
Yeah. I've had an evolution of because I was my natural self, my original self was very much my hard work will get me there. Like, and then living in New Orleans, I'm really glad that I learned how to use my network living in New Orleans before moving to LA because it's helped me immensely. But just like, all right, I have this network thing. Let me try to start using it. And so I was using it more in the volunteer space of getting into these different leadership development programs. And I'm like, okay, so because sometimes your hard work, like nobody cares.
Yeah.
And so I would be in these programs where, you know, somebody, I was in the New Orleans Economic Development Program, ambassador program, sorry. And like I would look at the bios that they would send around of all the people in there, and like other people were like, their bio is essentially, I go to work. And then mine is like, I go to work, I volunteer for like 4 organizations outside of my job, and I do all these things. But the person who I was in another development program with said she had to advocate for me to get into this one. So it's just like, sometimes nobody cares about your hard work. But
Yeah,
you still have to be able to do the job when you get there.
yeah. I mean, you have to be able to produce results, I think.
Which I think is a result of being partially a result of being Black, because I've noticed that some people don't have to produce the results.
Right. Yeah. Which is kind of where my mind went, like right after I said it too, which like had me lose my other thought. But yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think your reality of life has a great, or if not everything, to do with kind of what your mindset is, and what you believe in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know, again, believe, like even like how you relate to work, right? Like if you really,
Mm-hmm.
you know, again, the other cliche is like, you know, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? But I think there's something to it. If you really enjoy what you do, it doesn't really occur like work. You know, if you have fun doing it, you know, you're just getting paid for it. And I think that's what we want to aim at, you know, as human beings, is we want to do work that's meaningful, and we want to do stuff that we actually enjoy. Nobody wants to, you know, do a job that they hate doing, spend most of your life doing something that you don't enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
or that you actually hate. That's no good. But I think that's a lot of why, you know, being creative people, we're attracted to um, these industries, as animation and games, is that they are really fun, and
Mm-hmm.
most people that you meet that work in these fields are generally like fun people, and they like, you know, again, they're like big kids, like I know, like I am, who love animation, never gave up that love of it, love
Mm-hmm.
playing games, you know, love fantasy, sci-fi, Marvel, you know, Game of Thrones, you know, Star Wars, Star Trek, all this stuff, you know, which is all, you know, fantasy fun, you know.
Yeah. So you've been in the augmented reality, virtual reality, XR space. Can you kind of tell people what's happening there now and what you've been doing?
Yeah, I haven't done a ton with that recently. I've been
Mm-hmm.
really focused on more traditional games and educational programs, and again, managing this big this big project, which I didn't mention before. Part of the LA game project that I'm leading is also, the full name is called LA Game Design, Game Technology, and Esports. So I'm also learning a lot more about esports, and in the process of building like a state of the art esports arena at City College, and just figuring out what games are going to be played and the structure, um, and all of that. So I'm sorry, what was your question again?
The people watching are
The
interested
XR,
in the
right?
VR XR space.
Yes. So the last thing that I major in, I think, project or initiative I had in the XR space was around the pandemic. I got a grant from an Epic Mega Grant to create an XR laboratory called the XR Wizards Lab, and we ran the prototype. Actually, at two schools, we did the online prototype during the pandemic at LA City College. Then we did, once we came out of the pandemic and started having like live classes again. I worked at Chapman University, and we did a pilot course there as well, where in both situations we had students get to form small teams and develop a concept and pitch a VR project, and then actually go into production on it and build a prototype. And so we created the XR Wizards Lab to I'm on a call. We created the XR Wizards Lab to basically give colleges, universities, training institutions the ability to create a training forum or laboratory for XR. And again, we focused on calling it a laboratory just because a lot of these technologies and platforms are so new and so evolving that I still feel like, and we would definitely feel like when we started a few years ago, that you needed to take a laboratory and a very experimental approach to production, and you need to foster that throughout your training. And so so that was the last kind of like major thing that I did. I'm now looking at a couple of opportunities in terms of bringing immersive technology into education, which again kind of goes to my kind of vision and of seeing education become more immersive and more game-like. So there's a few things that I'm in discussions about working on in the next probably year or so.
And really quickly, I feel like a lot of us know what augmented and virtual reality is. What is XR?
I use the term XR, and like why we call it the XR Wizards Lab is just because, I mean, some people, if you look it up on the internet, you'll see like some different people have different definitions. Like some people use the X as like mixed, so it's like a combination possibly of AR VR. For me, I just always kind of defined it as it's X reality. So it's like the X stands for the unknown. Like we don't know. We're talking about augmented reality and virtual reality now, but we don't know what that thing is going to look like or be like in 4 or 5 years, just because technology is advancing at such an accelerated rate now. That's exponential. And so it kind of future proofs whatever you're working on. I think if you call it an XR project, and that can definitely include augmented reality and virtual reality as well.
If someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in entertainment?
What would I want them to highlight? Gosh, that's tough. It's kind of hard to think about what I would look at outside of what I do, because so like I said, like I think the thing that kind of defines me most is my relationship to games, like just
Mm-hmm.
because I play board games as a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
It's my work. Um, it's just so woven into what I do. I can't really think of anything that's that much more important. Um,
Yeah.
Family relationships, self development, things like this
Mm-hmm.
are important, but they all kind of like you know lead back to what I love, which is the games and the animation. So
Yeah. So if anybody wants to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
yes, I just started a new Instagram, which is at I think it's video underscore game underscore career underscore coach.
Mm-hmm.
So video game career coach. Eirc T Elder. Probably the best way is for people to connect with me is my LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just like Google Eirc T Elder at LinkedIn and reach out to me there.
It'll be in the description.
Okay. I also, have a TikTok, Eirc T Elder
Mm-hmm.
TikTok, which I'm starting to build up. I'm just starting to create, again, more content around advice for careers
Mm-hmm.
in animation. So, yeah, if you're interested in hearing more, you had questions, or you want to get like a consultation with me, happy to do it. I was just at Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
This was last weekend, and I always go there and they have this great program called the Game Career Connect,
Mm-hmm.
where a bunch of mentors in the industry get into a room, and you can just, as an attendee, go and meet with whoever you like and get, it's kind of like speed dating, like 10 to 15 minute,
Yeah.
like mentoring or coaching session. So really enjoy that. But we recorded some of them, so I'll be posting some snippets from that on my social media in the next few weeks or so.
But I would like to thank you for allowing me to highlight you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a long time coming. I'm really just loving the work that you're doing, and just getting all these like great diverse voices. So
Mm-hmm.
glad to be one of them.
And to everyone out there, I want you to like So I Know It's Real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Citadel, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal, and I'll see you in the next video.
Peace.